Hello and welcome to the Digital Lighthouse, where we get inspiration from tech leaders to help us navigate the exciting and ever-evolving world of digital transformation. I'm Zoe Cunningham. We believe that meaningful conversations can illuminate the path forward, helping us harness the power of technology for innovation, scalability and sustainability. On this episode, I'm delighted to introduce Clare Sudbery. Clare is an independent technical coach helping clients improve team performance through clarity, alignment and behaviour. Clare has an impressive 23-year career history in software engineering at organisations including the National Institute for Clinical Excellence, Swinton Insurance Group and laterooms.com. In between her technical roles, Clare has also worked as a maths teacher and achieved the impressive feat of writing 2 novels. In her current role, she supports technical leaders and helps technical teams improve their software engineering practices. In this episode, we'll be diving into what it means to truly work ensemble, where each team member is not just working alongside their colleagues, but truly collaborating. Clare will walk us through the benefits. Clare, welcome to the Digital Lighthouse.
Hello, and thank you for having me here.
Clare, you've worked in software engineering across an incredible range of organisations, from public sector to insurance to travel. Could you share some more details about your journey and what you've learned along the way?
I mean, I have to be careful because it could take a long time. And interestingly, I realised I hadn't quite proof-checked your bio because you said 23 years and it's now more than 25 and I've stopped counting.
Yeah.
All I can say is it's more than 25 years that I've worked in tech. I think that I quite like the way that the story that I often tell people is that I see my career as having been split in 2 halves. So I was working for tech companies in Manchester for 12 years. I quickly rose to senior engineer level and then I stopped. I was a senior engineer for like 10 years or whatever. And I became less and less engaged with what I was doing. And I think it became a kind of vicious cycle. I asked to do the more interesting stuff. People said no, so I got less interested. I always struggled with insecurities that I didn't think that I knew as much as my colleagues did, that I didn't think I was as good as my colleagues. I think a lot of that is to do with having very frequently been the only woman on the team. And it's very difficult not to let these crazy ideas get in your head that somehow as a woman you're less capable. So anyway, long story short, at the end of that 12-year period, by which point I had already written 2 novels and given birth to 1 child, both of which were other things that were taking my passion and attention, I was made redundant. And I thought, you know what? I don't really want to do this anymore. And that was when I became a high school maths teacher. So I spent 2 years being a teacher. I spent 2 years being a writer. So that was a 4-year period where I was out of the industry and I didn't think I was coming back. So I was making no attempt to catch up with what was happening in the industry. And also towards the end of that 12-year period, my career had been stagnating anyway. So I already wasn't really up to date with what was happening and was less and less interested. But after 4 years, unfortunately, being a high school maths teacher didn't really work out. And I didn't have a job, but I did have 12 years of experience as a software engineer. And, I could see that wasn't nothing, even though I didn't think that I was going to come back. So what I did was I did come back into the industry, but I came back at entry level. So I got a job for a company that explicitly had a habit of taking on graduates and then training them up. So they were very strong on training, on teaching and learning. They were very keen for people to both ask and answer questions. It was mandated, in fact. You were supposed to ask and answer questions. And, that was part of what they were about. Also, they were a web development shop and I'd previously only developed desktop software. because I left, I was made redundant, I think, in 2007. And at that point, it was entirely possible to have nothing to do with web development, to only write desktop software. But when I came back in, the company that I worked for was called Web Apps. It was entirely web development. And so that was a new skill. Working asynchronously instead of synchronously was a big shock and a logical shift in terms of how you think about software, that everything isn't synchronous. But I found it fascinating. I really wanted to learn. And I often tell the story of, one time when I was in the classroom and one of the pupils said to me, "Oh, miss, all you have to do is stand there." And I was like, "Oh, God, if only you knew. I wish I could just sit and have a teacher pump my brain full of knowledge." And I know it's not that simple being a teenager. It's they have other things to worry about. But I was jealous. I was jealous of people who got to spend their whole day learning. I wanted to learn too. So it was exciting to me to come. And the way that I thought about it was, rather than feel insecure about not knowing stuff, if I just say, "Listen, I'm an empty vessel, fill me up. Like, I don't know anything. Let's pretend I don't have 12 years of experience, and then I don't have to feel insecure about, having to pretend I know stuff that I don't know. I'm just going to be really excited to learn." And of course, those 12 years of experience were much more valuable and meaningful than I thought they were. And actually, I knew a ton of stuff that I didn't think I knew. And actually, software development skills are highly transferable. And even though I'd never done async before, actually, I could pick it up pretty easily. That first job I had, they also used SQL, which I'd also never worked with before. So I taught myself SQL in the week before the job interview. I mean, obviously, I didn't become an expert in that 1 week. But what I realised was I can learn. I'm excited to learn. And so my attitude ever since then has been completely different. Obviously, I still have insecurities. I don't think they're ever going to go away. I wish they would. You would look at somebody in my position with the experience that I've got, in the second half of my career. I've been a contractor, a consultant, a technical lead. I teach people. I travel the world speaking at events and running workshops. And still, I worry that I'm not clever enough, and I don't know enough stuff, and that I'm not as good as everybody else. I wish my brain didn't do that to me, but it does. But it also means that I can understand how it feels for other people. And because I spend so much time teaching, I mean, the way I characterize it now is that I get to be a teacher without having to be a teacher. It's not my job in a school, but I get to teach adults, which is easier than teaching teenagers because they don't have so much other crap going on in their heads. And they're more motivated and engaged. But I do get to teach, and I love to teach. I love helping people have those experiences of learning. And it actually means that I also get to do even more learning because I learn to teach. I will deliberately teach things that I know less about so that I can learn them in order to teach them. And it's the last step of learning. It's the step where things really, really get you get that deep understanding, is when you have to teach it to somebody else. And so, I could give you chapter and verse of how the second 12 plus years of my career involved me trying lots of different modes of working. So I've mentioned contracting, I've mentioned consultancy, I'm now independent. But one of the things that's been really important for me is to be able to experiment and change and move and try different things out. I've also just last year been diagnosed with ADHD, which is definitely relevant to my tendency to move constantly between different things, always be moving and wanting to do something new. Brain absolutely never quiet, full of ideas. One of my challenges is to keep myself on track and not just go squirrel. But yeah, it is the teaching and the learning and the collaboration as well. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. But in that second half of my career, what I realized was how powerful collaboration is. And that was something that I didn't embrace in the first half. I think that's partly how I managed to stay so insecure for so long, is that it was too easy for me to work on my own. I wasn't working with organizations that used agile techniques. So it was entirely possible for me to be sent away with a task to do for weeks, and then come back and supposedly deliver the thing that I'd been working on, rather than there being any kind of regular check-in. So that was another thing that discovering agile techniques, discovering extreme programming practices, discovering collaborative working practices, and realizing that they weren't as scary as they thought, and I could interact with people without exploding. But anyway, yes. So it means that I understand what it feels like to prefer to work alone, to be scared of people finding out that you don't know stuff.
Brilliant. Well, yeah, let's start there then. So
yes.
You've got this great term, ensemble working. And so I'd love to explore. For me, I've always been there's teamwork and there's working as an individual. Does ensemble working mean something more than that?
It does. It's actually a very specific practice, which previously people used to call mob programming. And I think, to be honest, within the industry, that is still the most common term. People will talk about mobbing or mob programming. Most people think of it as referring to writing code specifically. And it is an extension of pair programming. So when you're pair programming, you have two people working together. I was going to say sitting next to each other, but these days, not necessarily. But two people working on the same computer, or using the same processor at any rate, to build the same piece of code. So they're looking at the same code at the same time. It's two minds working on one problem. Ensemble programming is that, but with more than two people. I think the sweet spot is between 4 and 6 people, and I think most people do tend to work with those kinds of numbers. When I first encountered it, it was before lockdown and before I'd done any remote working, so it was absolutely a team of people between 4 and 6, literally physically looking at the same screen. And we set things up so that we had a giant table. We actually stole the table from the boardroom and a giant screen, because obviously between 4 to 6 people looking at one laptop, not pleasant. No, that's going to lead to a lot of neck and shoulder problems. But ensemble working is a group of people working on one computer, one problem at the same time. It's also called mob programming, and it's also called software teaming. And Woody Zewell, who originally came up with the term mob programming, now prefers not to use it. He prefers to talk about software teaming.
Brilliant, brilliant. So the other thing I'd just like to explore to kind of set us up is the change you talked about in your journey, right? From coding on your own and thinking my job is to be here on my own, to do this on my own, to produce some code. That's what it means to be a coder. To this shift of we're producing it as a team, and that can mean all kinds of things for what we do individually. So could you explain a bit about why being part of a team is so critical for software development? Why, creating it as a team is so important?
Yeah, great question. So it is possible to develop software on your own, but you're not going to do it very quickly, and you're not going to create anything that's very big. And actually, modern software is typically big. So code bases are big. There's, it's not unusual to be serving millions of users. It's not unusual to be having millions of transactions a day. That kind of system can't be built by one person alone. And those kinds of systems, which are ubiquitous, they're everywhere. And also, those big systems, you can have a big system that appears small. You can be building a small mobile app that feels like a physically tiny thing because it's on a physically small device, and it might be doing something trivial. It might just be a game, or it might just be a very small utility app that doesn't appear to do very much. And yet, behind the scenes, it's a large code base with a large team of people working on it that has several moving parts. And there isn't even just one code base. Bits of it are on the cloud, bits of it's interacting with third-party services that are scattered all over the place. And so it's actually very difficult to build software with just one person. And therefore, because the systems are so complex, you need several people working on them. And if those people are operating in isolation, that's going to cause problems. Because not only do the different components of the software have to interact with each other, in order to make that happen smoothly, people have to interact with each other. And people have to understand what it is they're trying to do. They have to understand how each part works, how the pieces interact. They have to understand what it is the user wants. They have to understand how it's deployed. They have to understand security concerns. They have to understand lots of things, but no one person is going to hold all of that stuff in their head. So different people have to understand different parts to greater or lesser degrees. And that's only going to work if they can communicate with the other people who know the other things, and be able to do that in a way that means that each person isn't just telling everything they know to another person. We have to be able to understand what's important and what isn't important. And we have to be able to prioritize. And we have to be able to communicate when things go wrong. And we have to be able to collaborate about how to fix things when things go wrong. All of that requires a lot of collaboration and a lot of communication. And it's funny, though, because we still tend to, as an industry, think of ourselves very much as individuals. And sometimes be kind of resistant to high degrees of collaboration.
So let's talk a little bit about the history as well. So there have been over this period that it sounds like you and I have been around a similar amount of time, building systems and seeing new concepts arrive and then sometimes also depart. How influential have things like agile programming and extreme programming been on this concept of ensemble working?
Yeah, people can talk about the history of Agile, the current state of Agile endlessly, and to a lesser degree, extreme programming. So extreme programming is less well known and therefore has become less polluted, maybe not a great word, but Agile has been around for so long and has been visible for so long and known about for so long that it's had a lot more opportunity to just become a thing that people are like, oh God, really? And it has become a thing that people kind of pay lip service to without really, really getting the benefit from it that they could be. And Agile is more than 20 years old. Extreme programming is more than 20 years old. And yet, there aren't many people who are really making the most of Agile. And there are even fewer people who are really making the most of extreme programming. And I should explain what extreme programming is because people won't necessarily know. It often gets shortened to XP. The X having been pulled out of the middle of the word extreme. There are actually 13 tenets. I'm not going to go into all of them. I think it's 13. But the practices that people will be most aware of are test-driven development, pair programming, continuous integration. And there's something else as well, which has gone out. Oh, refactoring. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So those are the 4 things that people will be most aware of. And those are 4 things that I am particularly excited about and spend a lot of time on. And then pair programming has now kind of extended into ensemble programming or mob programming or software teaming. And it sits within the idea of Agile. So extreme programming is also very much about frequent iterations, fast feedback loops, making sure that you're trying to break everything down into really small steps and constantly reviewing what you're doing, assuming that everything will change all the time. And nothing is going to stay the same. So you want to avoid too much upfront work. You don't want to be using waterfall practices where you decide what you're going to do and then 6 months later you do it. You want to decide the smallest possible thing, do it really quickly, get feedback, and then find out what you discover and decide what the next step might be. Interestingly, Agile did not have anything to say about pair programming. Pair programming came out of extreme programming, but extreme programming and agile were very close to each other and absolutely feeding into each other constantly. And then ensemble programming came out of pair programming. And Woody Zuell, who first came up with the idea of mob programming, was very much, also working within agile practices. So also looking at short feedback loops, iterative programming, tiny steps, breaking everything down, assuming that there will always be change. And that's all that agile means. I like to think of the actual word agile. Agile means being able to move quickly and change direction. That's agility. That's really all it is. Assume that things will change and that you're going to have to change direction, and therefore anticipate that and move in tiny steps, because the smaller the steps, the more agile you are.
Yeah.
And really that's it's as simple as that. What ensemble programming gives you is the ability to have those fast feedback loops propagate much more quickly, because everybody sees when things change, because everybody's in the room. So the thing about working individually is that even if you have daily stand-ups, so the time between communication is only 24 hours, that's still 24 hours of doing things on your own. And during those 24 hours, a lot can change and a lot can go wrong. And if you think I'm on my own, then you're not going to tell people when things go wrong. And actually, there's going to be a tendency to want to hide it, because there's going to be a tendency to think, oh, no, that was my fault.
Right. Yeah.
And people are going to find out how useless I am, and they're going to tell me off, or they're going to judge me, which is why also no blame culture is a really important part of Agile NXP. But if you're all in the same room at the same time, working on the same thing, then you all find out when things change. You know straight away, and you all know the tiny little details of the little thing that needed changing. And another really powerful part of it is it's not just software engineers who are part of an ensemble. Typically, people who are not deeply hands-on technical might come and go, so they might not be there all the time. But you can bring in your testers, you can bring in your product owner, you can bring in any kind of management levels that you have. And I'm not even going to say roles, because role names change so much between different organizations. But you can bring in people who have an interest and an input into what's happening. And you can have the conversations with them live, rather than going off and having a meeting and then coming back and then having to share what's been decided in the meeting. All of it is all happening with everybody all at the same time. And in terms of agility, in terms of XP, that's amazing, because you can iterate really quickly. You can get very fast feedback, and you can propagate the knowledge very effectively.
Could you run us through maybe just a kind of example of how you might run it? Is it 4 people in a room together all day, every day? And if so, how would the roles break down? Or is it more flexible than that in terms of what we're talking about here?
It absolutely depends. So there are companies, there aren't very many, but there are companies who do it all day, every day. The best example that I'm aware of is Hunter Technologies, which, funnily enough, is the company that Woody Zuell was working for when he first came up with the idea. He doesn't work there anymore, but he has left that legacy behind, and they still, a long time later, at least 10 years later, still work as a whole company using ensemble work or software teaming as their main practice. So actually describing how it is for them is a good place to start. And I know, because I got to visit, and they do encourage people to go and visit. I'm in the UK and they're in America, so I didn't physically visit, but they work mostly online anyway. So I spent a day with one of their teams observing and joining in. One of the great things about this is that people can join in. So, and honestly, this is interesting. I've seen so many people do it. I can't remember the mechanics of how they do it, but I can tell you how I do it when I'm introducing it to teams, is that we take it in turns with a timer. And exactly how long that timer lasts is going to depend. Exactly how you decide who goes next is also going to depend. But typically that time is going off between 3 and 10 minutes, every 3 to 10 minutes. Could be as long as 15 minutes. It really, different teams will build up their own rhythms. And that's really important, that it is bespoke. You do what works for you.
Yeah.
You don't follow a template. There isn't a rule that you have to do it like this. It's very important that people constantly review. So I think at Hunter they have daily retros. It might be weekly, but I think they do have a little thing at the end of every day. Certainly when you're introducing it to a new team, you want to do it daily. At the end of every day, you're like, how did that go? What worked? What didn't work? What was great? And we want to do even more of it. Dial up the good is one of Woody's great sayings. And let's try doing it differently tomorrow. We didn't like 3-minute intervals. They were too short. Let's try 5 tomorrow. And then, or maybe we try 10 tomorrow. And then we decide, no, actually 10's too many. Or it's still not enough. Let's try 15. And depending how much trust there is, you'll be able to have longer time periods. You need to really, really know that nobody is feeling left out and nobody is feeling insecure. Because, for instance, if you have a 15-minute time chunk and there are 4 people, that's 45 minutes out of every hour that somebody is potentially not engaged and also worrying that they're not quite sure what's going on. So it's very important to really believe that everybody is on board. Nobody's feeling left out and nobody's feeling insecure. So being kind to each other is another one of Woody's absolutely top rules. And I would say if there was any cast in die, absolutely you have to do this, being kind to each other. Very, very important. Paying attention to how people are feeling, how they're doing. So you take it in turns on a timer. And again, you can do it in different ways, but a really common way of doing it is that every time the timer switches over, you just have a list that you go cycle through. So it's always the same order. One person is the typist and one person is the speaker. And again, people use different terms to describe them. I like to say typist and speaker because that's unambiguous. Yeah. So one person is typing, one person. When you use things like driver and navigator, you have to understand something about how racing cars work, and it's not obvious. So speaker and typist. So and not everybody does it that way, but it's a nice way of doing it and it's also useful for pair programming, because if the typist is not the speaker, then that means that the speaker has to be very clear about what they want to do next. And it can literally be, write this line of code. Again, one of the techniques you quickly learn is you don't want to say, write this character, now write this character, now write a semicolon. Because that's very difficult for people to follow. Other people get disengaged very quickly. So you want to be able to have a natural way of describing what you're doing, at which you become more or less detailed depending on how easily the communication is happening. If the person who's speaking is not the person who's typing, then they have to be very clear about what they're doing and why. And if the typist is not the person making the decisions, then you don't have that thing of somebody just going, oh, and it's all happening in their head and it's going whooshing by on the screen and everybody else is like, what? What are you doing? Why are you doing it? Because you want everybody to be involved. And there are also different processes for allowing the 2 people who are not in those 2 roles to also be active. And again, really depends how active they're going to be. But it's very important that everybody's engaged, that everybody understands what's going on. But because you have such a fast turnover, it means that what's happening is in everybody's head. Everybody knows what's happening. So somebody can nip out to make a phone call. Somebody can go and get something to eat. Somebody can go to the toilet. It's fine. It doesn't matter because they'll pick it up again when they come back into the room. Somebody can go away for a week or a day or whatever, or half a day. They'll pick it back up again when they come back into the room. And it means that it's not just stuck in that one person's head. So the slightly unpleasant term, bus factor, what would happen if somebody got run over by a bus? It's much less impact. But also what will happen is every now and then they will come up against something. They'll be like, oh, actually, is this what we're supposed to be doing? Is this what the users want? Is this what the product owner wants? Did we understand the requirements? What if it might need to change slightly because of this? You don't need to wait for a meeting. You can just call the product owner in, call the tester in, call the relevant party in, call somebody from another team in. That was something I noticed a lot at Hunter. There was a lot of movement between teams, like bring somebody else from another team into our ensemble, because they're not crucial to their ensemble. So they can come into our ensemble and they can answer our questions about how we're going to integrate with their thing. It definitely sounds like surely it's inefficient. Surely 5 people being paid 5 wages and only doing one thing. How could that possibly be efficient and effective? But it is, because people underestimate how costly it is to have handoffs, how costly it is to have tons of meetings, how costly it is for there to be a delay between making a decision and acting on that decision, how costly it is to have communication gaps between different people and between different teams. And what this does is massively reduces that friction. Now, most people don't do that. Most people don't do it all day, every day. And even the people that do it all day, every day, people will still go off and do individual tasks. So people will leave the ensemble to go do their timesheets or to answer their emails or you know, so people do still do individual work. And some people, rather than do it all day, every day, in fact, it's much more common for people to use it in specific circumstances. And the 2 most obvious ones that people are most likely to use it for are onboarding and training. So if you have a new member joining your team, it's really effective to get the whole team. And this applies to pairing as well. So people don't use pairing ubiquitously, but they're much more likely to use it for onboarding and training. So ensemble is just an even bigger version of that and more effective in my view. But if you've got a new person joining the team, then you all work together on a feature for a period of time. Maybe only an hour, maybe half a day, maybe a week, but with gaps and breaks. And but it means that new person gets to know everybody, gets to know what everybody knows, and everybody gets to introduce them to the code base all at once. Or what, you know, not everybody works with code bases, but whatever it is that you're working with.
Right.
So onboarding. Great context for ensemble working. Training also. If a team is being introduced to a new tool or a new technology, if you've decided you're going to switch to a different language or you're going to start using a new thing, do it all at the same time. Get together in a room and learn together. It's really effective. You might work through official training resources or you might not. You might just say, listen, let's build a thing using this new technology and together we'll work out how it works. Typically in that kind of scenario, there's somebody to one side Googling stuff and you might take it into or looking stuff up, which actually happens in any ensembles. There'll be somebody who's like, we're not quite sure about this. Don't worry, I'll go and Google it while you lot carry on. Then I'll come back and tell you what I've learned. Or you'll all Google it together. You know, you've all got a screen in front of you. So it again, massively depends. It will be different in so many different circumstances. But onboarding, training, 2 really good ones. And then the other one is starting a new feature. So quite often people won't normally work as an ensemble, but when they're starting a new feature, they'll all get together so that they can all see what's going on all at the same time and they can have those conversations all together instead of wasting time in meetings and huddles and all the rest of it. And typically ensemble people who do it all the time, they don't have meetings as such because it's all a meeting.
Right, exactly.
So they don't have to have planning meetings and backlog refinement and all of that stuff because they're all there at the same time. And it means they're doing things just in time. And the thing that I've always hated about backlog refinement and planning meetings is that even if it's weekly and typically it's more like fortnightly, you've got 2 hours in a room and you're just like being bombarded with one feature after another, and you're trying to like make sense of all of it all at once. And then it could be 2 weeks before you work on it, by which time you've forgotten what happened in that meeting anyway. So
yeah. Oh, Claire, thank you so much. It's been such a whistle-stop tour. And your enthusiasm for the topic is so infectious. And I think that the way you've highlighted how it's not one thing that's done, it's not a set of rules, and it's not about following a set of rules. It's about finding out what works and what works for your team, which is not what works for you as an individual. It's what works in these complex interactions that we all have to have to make, like you say, large pieces of software together. And I just think it's so I'm excited, and I hope that everyone else is excited about the potential to go and play and have fun and see what they can do on their teams. And there is anyone who's listening to this on release date, there's a great opportunity to go and see Clare in Manchester at the Outpace conference. And is there other places where people can, other resources you have they can go and learn from?
Oh, like so many. Lots of videos online of me doing talks on this topic and other related talks that we've talked about today. In November in Amsterdam, I'm going to be running a 2-day workshop on test-driven development and AI. So how to do a real deep dive into how to make the most of agentic coding by using test-driven development and other techniques to make sure that the code that's developed is robust. And I'm also, that same week in Amsterdam, also for Trifork Academy, doing a 1-day workshop on how to handle the technical in technical leadership.
Oh, amazing.
If you just look me up online, everything's linked to everything. You'll be able to find the stuff.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you so much, Clare.
Pleasure.
This Digital Lighthouse episode was edited by Steve Folland and produced by Patrick Anderson. The theme music was written and recorded by Ben Balo. A huge thanks to our sponsor Software for their continuing support from the inception of the show in 2019 to the present. If you love the podcast, please let us know with a rating and a review on your platform of choice. We're always looking for feedback to ensure we're making the best show possible. And if you'd like to take part, please drop us a line at thedigitallighthouse@softwire.com. You can catch Clare in person this October at Outpace Conference, an affordable 1-day conference for senior technologists by senior technologists. Clare will be diving deep into everything we've covered today on Ensemble working to help deliver high-quality software products, and will be joined by over 12 speakers sharing stories around the big, thorny challenges that we're all facing today. You've been listening to The Digital Lighthouse with me, Zoe Cunningham. Thank you for sharing your time with us, and stay safe on this wide technological ride that we're all on.